Hello, dear comrades. Our lectures on the concept of public safety, introducing this concept of dead water, are coming to an end. And today we will indeed consider what is called the economy in our modern life. So, we have studied 6 priorities of generalized means. And you remember, the simplest way to oppress people is when some want to oppress others. The simplest way is the use of force. This is a simple priority. The 6th, it is unstable. It does not provide stable management of people. To increase stability, there are higher priorities. And the 5th priority is the weapon of genocide, which allows for the oppression of people's psyche, affects, and intoxicates people's consciousness, makes them dependent on alcohol, drugs, and other psychotropic substances, and also allows for the management of people. But this is also unstable. As the chief of a tribe of Indians or a Tumbuyumbu, or the president of any country can, under the influence of other people, acquaintances, come out of a state of intoxication, or under the influence of any drugs, a more powerful economic priority serves to increase stability. That is, when money is lent to the chief of the tribe at interest, and the children and grandchildren of such a chief or head of state, even a president of any country, will pay it back. This will be the subject of our conversation today. Well, to ensure robbery, the plundering of people through usury, to intoxicate people, to kill them in wars and in interethnic conflicts, higher priorities serve. At the 3rd priority, the manipulation of people's consciousness occurs through various religious cults, beliefs, and secular ideologies. People are divided into parties, various movements, and so on. From the perspective of the 2nd priority, a false interpretation of various facts is given, or on the contrary, an abundance of facts when a person simply starts to get lost in them, not understanding how one depends on the other. Historical myths form certain ideologies and religious cults. By adhering to ideological myths, people can also be kept in obedience. And finally, the most powerful priority is when people are given such knowledge, that on the one hand seems to provide knowledge, but does not offer holistic understanding. And this priority is referred to as a methodological priority, a worldview priority, in the concept of public safety called dead water. So, should slaves work well? They should. That's why they are given some knowledge. But holistic knowledge is not given because the slave owner does not want the slave to understand more than him. All of this is implemented through the system of preschool, school, higher, and even academic education. Here is the priority of generalized means of managing people. And from this entire set of priorities, today we will consider 1, the economic priority. And I would like you, while delving into what is now called, to keep all the other priorities in mind collectively, because they are applied not separately, although there is such application separately, particularly in the case of war, but in general, they are applied collectively. One just needs to be able to see which priority is dominant in relation to society in a given historical situation. So, what is called economics? It turns out that there is no economic science, either in our country or abroad. Why? Because the great Russian scientist Mendeleev said that science begins where measurement begins. So, there is no precise mathematical model that describes the functioning of macroeconomic systems. Why? To create, develop, and publish such a model would make it clear how the people are robbed, how they are deceived through usury and other illusory notions of how the economy functions. That is why such a model does not exist, and so our economists, all the democratizers, are guided by Western economic science, but Western science does not provide answers to this issue. Well, you all know the famous economist Leontief, who is an economic luminary. He passed away a few years ago, quite recently. So, he came up with a solution to the inter-industry balance equation, posed the problem, and such a problem can be solved. But he said that it cannot be solved. Why? He was awarded the Nobel Prize for this because he did a very good job for the globalizers. He stated that such a problem cannot be solved. And this is a system of linear equations. It can be solved. But in order to solve the so-called objective function, one must impose constraints on this objective function. And imposing constraints is a question about human needs. That is, what a person needs and what a person does not need. Therefore, we do not think that such a person, possessing certain knowledge and mathematical tools, did not know how to solve it. But this is a question of human morality. And to conclude the thought about our democratizers, who are oriented towards Western science, which, by the way, has not improved our lives, in the USSR and in Russia, a happy and abundant life with all conveniences, but on the contrary, it led to a crisis. If we take the same economist Leontiev, an economic luminary, then in his economic essay Politizdat from 1990, on pages 210-211, he writes, let me quote you, from 1990, on pages 210-211, he writes, let me quote you, unlimited universal access to knowledge and ideas arising from research is a highly desirable quality for society and humanity as a whole. However, it creates a serious problem for anyone who would like to engage in scientific research. That is, the production of knowledge on a commercial basis for the sake of profit. In order to justify investments in research, corporations must be able to sell their results. But who will pay for a product that becomes available to everyone from the moment it is released, and knowledge truly becomes accessible to all? Why not just wait for someone else to perhaps maybe pay for it, and then simply get it for free? Who will engage in baking bread if a few loaves can feed not only 4,000 men, women, and children, as told in the New Testament, but also all the hungry? This quote encapsulates the entire biblical Talmudic elite corporate sociology, pleasing the global Judeo-predictor, including economic science and Marxism. Here in this quote is the fear of one's own insignificance, that is, how do I share this knowledge? I discovered something, conducted useful research for people. It has to be for money. And how do I get a gift from this? This is a question of morality, dependency, and so on. Well, and about the real possibilities of Western economic science, which our democratizers are guided by. This economic essay also quotes the words of the President of the Scientific Society of the USA. Listen to what this President of the Economic Scientific Society of the USA says. It is presented on page 268. The achievements of economic theory over the past 2 decades are both impressive and beautiful. But one cannot deny that there is something scandalous in the sight of so many people improving the analysis of the state of the economy, while not explaining why a particular situation arises or should have arisen. Oil prices have risen. A financial crisis has erupted in Southeast Asia. This state of affairs must be recognized as unsatisfactory and somewhat dishonest. Here you have all the possibilities of the so-called economic science, which cannot explain what is happening in the so-called economic world. And what is the reason for this? Because the processes related to managing the economy must be viewed from a management perspective, and the correspondence of this management, its goal setting, to the managerial hierarchy that exists in the universe. Therefore, in the concept of public safety, what is called this way, more precisely if endowed with a clear measure. This is the reproduction of generations in their connection with the reproduction and accumulation of material and immaterial products produced in a social labor association. In this process of reproducing generations, the life of our technocratic civilization unfolds, and the content of national economic issues of life-sustaining is the vision, understanding, description, and cause and effect relationships in the so-called economy. This concept is much broader than the scope of interests of traditional economic sciences. Why? Because traditional economic sciences avoid considering the process of reproducing generations in the biosphere. What are they concerned with? how to increase productivity by 0.5% of some pins, bushings, how to increase the speed of oil extraction, and how does this affect everything else? This is not addressed there. That is, there is no analysis of the consequences of production, moral, demographic, cultural, and ecological consequences. In other words, this is absent there. Partial tasks are being solved. The words morality and to like are cognate words such as, and what do they express? They express the objective study of human thought and external actions of a person, regarding what he, the person, does not perceive as evil. And all of this, his premeditation, his actions, will inevitably be reflected in the statistics of mass phenomena occurring in society, in the economy of the people, in the culture of society, including in economic science. Moreover, it should be noted that when talking about morality, there is morality. It exists in our society, the word exists. But the understanding is different. There is declared morality, which is what we are told from television screens or elsewhere, preached by various parties. And there is real morality, which objectively exists in society. And this is not a coincidence. Therefore, you should clearly distinguish between declared morality and that which objectively exists in society, when in words it is one thing, but in life it is completely different. Like the priests. They said one thing, but acted differently in life, just like the general secretaries of the tribunes said one thing. And that is why what happened in 1917 occurred. The people did not support it because they saw that the priests said one thing, but in life they did another. And in 1991, the people also did not support the party nomenclature, which called for action, among other things. Why? Because they saw this deception. And there is just a circular closure in time of these things. That is, it is depicted in the picture. Take a look. The development of the sense of measure in an individual. Based on the development of the sense of measure comes the mastery of knowledge. And the mastered knowledge, as a person increasingly masters the acquisition of knowledge, the mastery of knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge. Objective morality of a person's choice of behavior is formed. This is what concerns the individual. As for society as a whole, the picture becomes more complex. That is, there is a sense of measure, and we already know what a sense of measure is. It exists in every person, just like any other sense: sight, hearing, smell. This sense of measure allows for the acquisition of new skills, which leads to the mastery of new knowledge and the conceptual terminology of new knowledge. Based on this knowledge, the culture of society is formed, and on the basis of culture, the objective morality of society is formed. And in the case of incompatibility of objective morality with culture, when there is a dissonance, the sense of the world changes in one direction or another, either towards degradation or conversely towards high morality. Therefore, what are we talking about? That new knowledge can indeed only be accomplished based on the new morality that has been acquired, and therefore in this picture one can represent such a chain that explains how a spiral relies on one thread over another. That is, possessing a sense of measure allows one to acquire new knowledge, form a certain culture, on the basis of which morality is shaped towards higher spirituality. On the basis of this, new feelings of the world, mastering greater possibilities, new knowledge, and even higher culture, and so on. One can move either towards high morality and the mastery of potential, or conversely towards degradation. This process, in particular in our society, you see what direction it has taken. Why do we say this? And we pay so much attention to morality because, at its core, there must be a primacy of morality over knowledge and a primacy of sociology, that is, life statements, over the exact natural sciences. And what views currently dominate and are defining in our society? Natural and exact sciences are in the first place. In second place are sociology and the so-called humanities. In third place, if it even stands there, and often it is not even mentioned, is the morality of the researcher. And no one even stutters about the sense of measure at all, It should be the other way around. In the first place is the sense of measure, meaning the morality of the researcher from the perspective of the sense of measure. Then come sociological and humanitarian sciences, and finally, those that are applied, studying various partial processes occurring in the universe in nature, both living and non-living. These are the natural and exact sciences. Therefore, morality determines the height of scientific achievements, while immorality is the submission to temptation, that is, the concealment of knowledge, monopolistic ownership of knowledge, know-how, knowing how, but not telling anyone anything. Therefore, morality, based on circular closure, can change towards high spirituality and life-giving reason, or on the contrary, degrade towards intellectually armed parasitism. And then the consequence is immorality, lawlessness, which is currently prevailing in our society. This situation leads to a state of immorality and lawlessness, which is unfortunately becoming more and more prevalent in our society today. Therefore, atheism and the materialism of Marxism, which deny spirituality, are secondary. The world is not a unified whole for them. Rather, matter is in the first place, which supposedly produces consciousness by itself. Just like that, out of nothing, it produces consciousness. This is how it happened that a person came to be. Atheism, materialism, and Marxism were accepted by society and people because society morally degraded in the struggle for power in the mass totalitarianism, subconsciously relating to the management of social processes as an easy feeding trough without any responsibility, consciously relating to the management of social processes, that is, not even understanding this, like an easy feeding trough without any responsibility. So why do people strive for power? To obtain more goods, such as feeding troughs and other necessary items. Moreover, without bearing responsibility for management processes, they do not understand that there is managerial work, that there are management processes that one must manage. A sufficiently general theory of management, they do not know about its existence at all. It is believed that management is self-evident. I think so. Therefore, the science of management, the sufficiently general theory of management, does not fully exist. There are separate fragments primarily applicable to technical systems in nature. Therefore, all of this allowed for the fact that Marxism, the absence of measure and morality, led to this lawlessness. An illustration of such an immoral approach to research is the entire theory of Karl Marx. Whether Karl Marx was indeed fully disabled or only in one hemisphere does not matter, but he invented a doctrine that would never lead people to the communism that was declared. Why? Because there are three sources, three components of Marxism, two of which are rotten. The first is the incorrect formulation of the main question of philosophy, which is whether matter or consciousness is primary. In fact, we have already considered that all processes are interdependent and mutually conditioned. And the second is the complete metrological inadequacy of Marx's political economy. And all his theory of surplus value is incorrect. By the way, Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, in his work Economic Problems of Socialism, signed the death warrant for Marxism. So this work was published in November 1952, and in it Stalin says, setting a task for Soviet scholars, we need to reconsider the tenets of Marx's political economy as inconsistent with what actually exists. And what does Stalin write? This primarily concerns categories such as necessary labor time and surplus time, necessary product and surplus product. But if you extract these things from Marx's political economy, then nothing will remain of it at all. That is, the theory of surplus value. And what did the people bite on? The third source is pure and clear. It is a just society. Therefore, the majority of people have not read Marx's Capital and did not know what he wrote. But since the red banner stands for justice, Karl Marx and Rosa Luxemburg, the best people, the ideal of humanity, went along without understanding. The result is what we have now, because these false things like a hanging rope will inevitably and unavoidably come. Speaking of the immorality of Karl Marx and this is evident if anyone has read his biography and his relationships with his wife, children, Friedrich Engels, and other matters. This is what led to it. Let's consider how Karl Marx refuted the dogma of Adam Smith. And this Adam Smith, was an economist, a contemporary of Karl Marx at that time. So what did Adam Smith have? The entire social capital. It is divided into the incomes of hired personnel and the incomes of entrepreneurs. Hired personnel and variable capital, while the incomes of entrepreneurs are surplus value, and from it comes the payment of taxes to the state, the consumption of capitalists, and the payment of wages to hired personnel in the future during the expansion and modernization of production. That is, in this scheme, such a division, all the money goes to paying the salaries of the staff and the corporate managers and benefits. In reality, it is only the wages that circulate within our society. What exactly does Karl Marx do in this context? Let's consider how he refuted Smith's dogma using the example of a jar of jam. As jam, we will consider the price of a product and a spoon. Here is depicted a bank with jam. As jam, we will consider the price of a product and lies, lies. So all the jam, that is, the price of the product, Marx already divides into three parts. V. This is the share of variable capital for the payment of its hired personnel. M. This is the share corresponding to the so-called surplus value. And C. This is the share corresponding to constant capital for the payment of products obtained externally for oneself. But after all, something is also produced externally, that is, it has some value. Therefore, C on its side, here on the smaller jar, can also be divided into V1, M1, C1, only in smaller sizes, of course. And so on, this division will continue. Look, there's already a small jar of jam. And what is this? Everything we are talking about is the theory of limits. There is such a section in mathematics, and then this C approaches zero. That is, indeed, the jar of jam will be scooped out to the bottom. This is how the so-called constant capital C appeared in Marxist-Leninist political economy. But how to return it to the circulation of money, Karl Marx does not say, and deceives us further and further. That is, Adam Smith was right, but all science, economic scholars, and Marxists have still accepted this dogma of Karl Marx, which refuted Adam Smith's dogma. And also, indeed, Pushkin in his famous work spoke about the price of goods and about economy, and he was a deep economist. That is, he could judge how the state becomes wealthy, what it lives on, and why it does not need gold when it has simple products, like these. That is, Pushkin was a contemporary of Karl Marx. So, do we actually eat gold? Or these paper dollars? We need to understand a simple thing once again. Goods and services rotate in one direction, and money in the other. There must be a correspondence. Commodity mass, monetary, more money, inflation, less money, deflation, and in general, if there are enough goods everywhere, what we will consider there is no shortage.